There is a version of Steffi Graf that the world accepted completely. The Golden Slam of 1988, all 4 Grand Slams and Olympic gold in the same calendar year. Something no player in history had achieved before or has achieved since. The 22 Grand Slam titles. The 377 weeks at world number 1. The forehand that defined an era. The composure that never cracked publicly, regardless of what was happening around her. That version is real. Every part of it is real. But underneath the composure and the trophies and the carefully maintained grace was something the public rarely saw. A capacity for feeling that ran deeper than the ice-cold exterior suggested. And for one specific opponent, one woman who's a rival in professional tennis created a tension that went beyond rivalry into something more complicated, more personal, and more permanently unresolved. That feeling had an edge to it that Graf never fully acknowledged and never fully put down. That woman was Monica Seles. Not just a rival, not just a competitor who happened to win matches against her. The one player who made Graf feel something she had never felt before on a tennis court. Genuinely threatened. Not in a single match or a single tournament. Fundamentally, existentially. In a way that touched the question of who Steffi Graf actually was when someone else was better. Understanding that feeling, understanding where it came from, and what it cost both women, means understanding one of the most complicated relationships professional tennis has ever produced. 1989. Monica Seles is 15 years old and already playing professional tennis with a confidence that borders on audacity. Born in Yugoslavia, trained in Florida, coached by her father, she arrives on tour as something the women's game hadn't seen before. 2 handed off both sides. A grunt that accompanies every shot with a volume that opponents find immediately disruptive. A baseline game built on angles and pace and relentless aggression that gives nobody comfortable time to set up. Steffi Graf, at this point, is the undisputed best women's tennis player in the world. The Golden Slam is fresh history. The ranking is number 1 by a distance that suggests nobody is coming close anytime soon. She is 20 years old and already feels like a permanent fixture at the top of the sport. Then she plays Monica Seles. The first time they meet competitively, the result is competitive in ways Graf hadn't expected from a 15-year-old. The double-handed ground strokes neutralize Graf's forehand in ways that most opponents couldn't manage. The angles are unexpected. The aggression is constant and unrelenting. Graf wins, but something registers. Something that doesn't register against most opponents. This one is different. 1990. Seles wins the French Open at 16 years old, the youngest French Open champion in history at that point. Graf watches from the perspective of the player she has beaten in the final the year before. The margin is closing faster than anyone anticipated. 1991. The shift becomes undeniable. Seles takes the world number 1 ranking from Graf in March. Not temporarily, not for a few weeks before Graf reclaims it. Permanently, for as long as Seles remains healthy enough to hold it. For Graf, this is not simply a ranking change. It is the first time in her professional career that someone has genuinely displaced her. Not beaten her in a tournament. Not had a good week or a good month. Taken the position she considered her own and held it with a consistency that said, I am better than you right now. Come and take it back if you can. Graf tries. She wins tournaments. She competes at the highest level. But Seles in 1991 and 1992 is playing tennis that is simply better than what Graf can match. 6 Grand Slam titles across those 2 years. Victories over Graf on multiple surfaces. A dominance that is not controversial or debatable. It is just the scoreboard telling the truth. The public Graf responds with grace. The correct words in press conferences. Acknowledgement of Seles as a worthy champion. Everything appropriate. But the grunt controversy tells a different story. Graf is the most prominent voice expressing discomfort with Seles' grunting. She raises it publicly, repeatedly, in terms that go beyond tactical observation into something that sounds like personal irritation. The grunt, that loud, consistent sound that accompanies every Seles groundstroke, becomes a point of conflict that Graf pursues with a persistence that most observers notice has an edge to it beyond simple, competitive concern. In hindsight, that edge makes complete sense. The grunt was the sound of Seles beating her. Of course it was irritating. Hamburg, April 30th, 1993. No account of Steffi Graf and Monica Seles can avoid this date. No honest examination of their relationship can pretend it didn't happen or minimize what it meant for both of their lives. Seles is playing a quarterfinal match at a tournament in Hamburg, Germany. She is 19 years old, world number 1, in the middle of a season that shows no signs of slowing down. Between games, during a changeover, a man named Günther Parsche steps from the crowd and stabs Monica Seles in the back with a boning knife. Parsche is a 38-year-old German man with an obsessive attachment to Steffi Graf. His stated motivation, given later in court proceedings, is that he wanted to injure Seles so that Graf could reclaim the world number 1 ranking. Seles is physically injured. The wound itself is not life-threatening, but the psychological damage is catastrophic and long-lasting. She does not return to professional tennis for 2 years and 3 months. When she does return in 1995, she is a different player. Technically, still exceptional, but carrying something that no amount of practice or preparation can fully remove. Graf reclaims the world number 1 ranking immediately. She wins Grand Slams during Seles' absence. She rebuilds the dominance that Seles had taken from her. And here is where the complexity of their relationship reaches its most uncomfortable point. Graf expresses sympathy publicly. She calls the stabbing horrific. She says the right things in the right settings. Nobody seriously questions her sincerity in those specific statements, but Graf also benefits from what happened, concretely, measurably, in the only currency that professional sport ultimately counts: rankings and titles. The number 1 position that Parsche, a man who did what he did specifically for Graf, handed back to her through an act of violence against her greatest rival. Graf never asked for that. She never wanted it that way. Those things are almost certainly true, but they don't resolve the complicated weight that Hamburg placed on everything that followed between these 2 women. The shadow doesn't disappear because Graf didn't create it. It just sits there over every match they play after 1993, over every ranking comparison, over every conversation about what the Graf career would have looked like if Monica Seles had stayed healthy and competing. August 1995. Seles returns to professional tennis at the Canadian Open in Montreal. She wins the tournament. She beats Graf in the final. The tennis world exhales with something close to relief. She is back, she is still extraordinary. The story is not over. But something between them has changed permanently. The dynamic that existed before Hamburg, two rivals competing for supremacy with the normal tensions of elite competition, cannot be fully restored. Too much has happened. Too much sits unspoken between them. Graf wins the 1996 U.S. Open final against Seles 7-5, 6-4. It is their last Grand Slam final against each other. Graf is clinical, precise. The composure holds completely. Seles competes but cannot find the level that would have been automatic before the stabbing. In press conferences after their matches, Graf is correct. Professional. She says the appropriate things. She does not betray whatever she actually feels in the private space that nobody gets to see. That private space is where the real story lives. And it is a space Graf has never fully opened. The hatred, and given everything, that word is not an exaggeration. That Graf felt toward Seles was never simple. It was never just competitive frustration or personal dislike, or the normal tension between rivals who push each other to uncomfortable places. It was fear made complicated by guilt, made complicated by relief, made complicated by the impossibility of ever fully separating Graf's legacy from what happened in Hamburg. Seles was the only player who made Graf genuinely afraid of losing her place. Not afraid of losing a match, afraid of being replaced permanently, of the identity she had built around being the best women's tennis player in the world, being taken away not temporarily, but for good. That fear expressed itself as hatred, because fear at the highest levels of competition almost always does. You cannot acknowledge fear toward an opponent and compete effectively. So it becomes something harder. Something that motivates rather than paralyzes. Graf never said any of this publicly. Her silence on the deeper complexities of their relationship has been consistent and complete across 3 decades since retirement. She gives the gracious answers. She acknowledges Seles as a great champion. She says the right things. But Steffi Graf competed against Monica Seles with an edge that went beyond normal rivalry. That edge had a name. It just wasn't one Graf was ever willing to say out loud. 22 Grand Slams. 377 weeks at world number 1. The greatest women's tennis career the sport has ever seen, by almost any measure. And running underneath all of it, from the moment a 15-year-old from Yugoslavia arrived and started winning matches that changed everything. One feeling that never fully resolved. Monica Seles brought out the best in Steffi Graf professionally. She pushed her to heights she might not have reached against lesser competition. She made Graf earn things that would otherwise have come more easily. She also made Graf feel something that Steffi Graf truly hated feeling. Threatened, vulnerable, second. And Steffi Graf truly hated her more than anyone for it.